Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of YouStation Tube. Today we have the pleasure of meeting with Shirley Smith. She's the Director of Student Diversity and Enrichment here at the USF Health College of Medicine. So what we're going to be discussing today is the AAMC Core Competencies. They've released a set of characteristics that they would like incoming medical classes to have. First, Shirley, why do you think they released this?
So there's 15 core competencies, and they're broken up into 4 categories. Interpersonal, intrapersonal, science competencies, thinking, and reasoning competencies. So how these came about, so the Committee on Admissions, which is part of a subgroup of the larger AAMC, which includes representatives from all medical colleges, wanted to have a way to convey to other people what medical schools valued. Wanted to have a way to convey to students as well as to potential letter writers what sort of information would be helpful to us in our assessment of students. And so by looking through some literature and looking at research, they agreed upon these 15 core competencies. And this is just the starting point, it's not the end point, but they're saying these are the things we need students to have coming in the door. And so this was just kind of a way to set the landscape so everyone would know what are medical schools valuing as far as traits and competencies for an incoming student. I also encourage students to provide these for their letter writers. AAMC actually has a brochure for letter writers about the 15 core competencies, so it's a lot of guidance. One of the problems they were getting letters of recommendation, and they were great letters, but they weren't given the data that the school was looking for to say, this is a candidate we want for our school.
Sure.
And those letters are going to tell you about more or less, really about those soft sides that people have, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and your critical thinking. Your basic science competencies, we get that. That's your transcript. Your critical thinking is someone can talk about how you work with them in a lab or show that. But the other ones, they're through people's experiences with you, interpersonal, intrapersonal. So the only way you're going to get those from a student's application is what they say about themselves and also what others say about them.
That's perfect. That's so helpful. When I was applying, my school counselor and then some of my mentors were talking about how to show that you're a real person on your application. And that you're ethical, that yes, you have cultural competency, you have stuff like that. And it was difficult to know how and where to fit that in, and also what was meant by that. So we're going to post a link in the description of the AAMC core competencies, so you can click on that down below. So I wanted to ask you, one of the core competencies is cultural competence. What does that mean to you?
I mean, there's a lot of definitions. I want to give something that I think is operational so people know what it looks like. And I like to use the word more like cultural humility than just a competence, because I sometimes believe people think it's competence once people check the box. They think they're done with that level of development, where cultural humility means I am willing to look at myself as well as understand others. I'm willing to do some level of cultural self-assessment and as the starting point for me learning about other people's cultures and experiences. And it's really about respecting what difference anyone brings into the room and seeing value in that difference. And how can that difference help us do our work better? How can that difference help us be more creative and innovative? We live in an ever-growing heterogeneous society, and it behooves any physician to be able to understand how to do that.
Sure. But
you have to be receptive to it, right? And so it begins with you doing your own exploration of your own culture and your identity.
So for some of our viewers, how do you develop something like that? How do you gain and how do you continue to have cultural competence or cultural humility, as you were saying?
I think we have to be purposeful in our actions, because once people leave work, where they live and who they socialize are often people who think like them, who look like them, who like the same things they like the same music, go to the same places of worship. And so in our private lives, it's probably not as degree of diversity of opportunity to learn other points of view about the world and how other people engage this world. Because we tend to, as humans, go back to everyone who looks like us.
Right.
So you have to be very purposeful in interacting with people who are not like you. And that's not just as far as any phenotypical expression. It has to be even with people who have different values and different beliefs. Because as a physician, you're always going to be in a room with someone whose values and beliefs are different than yours. Do you know how to navigate that conversation and still respect their values and beliefs, hold true to yours, and still provide the best treatment? You can't get that until you've got to practice it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I think some of the things we try to do here is when our students go to other communities and serve.
As an applicant to medical school, how do you get that across that you've had experiences like this? You know, if someone watches this video and says, that's something I want to do, and they go and volunteer and do something very similar to what you were just saying. You know, not just a one-time experience, but you know they've done this several times. How do they get cultural humility across to the admissions committee?
Right. So first and foremost, I tell students that your application to medical school really is your lab report, and the lab you're running is your life. And as with any good lab report, if you didn't take good notes along the way as you were running this essay or doing this reflux and you didn't take good notes, your lab report's going to be really hard to put together. So I really encourage students to keep a journal, and after every activity that they've done that relates to them trying to prepare for their career that's in the social setting, write notes. What did I do? What did I learn? What did I learn about myself? What did I learn about my own culture? What did I learn about other people's culture? Were there good points? Were there low points? These are all data points for later, because it's hard 4 years later to reflect on something you've done in your freshman year when your life has so many moving parts and pieces. As an undergraduate, there are going to be so many things you're doing. It's hard to just pick out those small ones when you have just this crazy amount of wonderful experiences that happen in 4 years of college, right?
Yeah.
And so it really is about being able to first collect that data ongoingly, and then really sitting down and just being reflective about what have you done, what experiences have you had, what did you learn about yourself in those experiences, what did you learn about other people in those experiences, what were some aha moments, what were some challenges that occurred, what did you learn about healthcare, about the human condition? I think keeping all that information together and being able to have that, then you can craft a story that talks about your growth in that experience, not about somebody else who you may have been in experience with, but you're talking about your growth through that experience. And so if you are having experience, for instance, saying that you are working with an immigrant population, as many of our students do, in our free clinics that students go through, there's opportunities always. You're interacting with someone whose language is not, first language is not English, and learning how to create space for conversation when it's difficult.
Absolutely.
You know, and learning, and if students doing that successfully, then they have the potential to be able to say, I've learned I have to adapt. I have to be willing to change the level of my language so that the patient can understand what I'm saying. And so if someone could reflect back upon that story in their application, they can say, you know, while I was in this volunteer experience, one of the things is I had to learn to do to be successful was to be willing to change and adapt to meet the needs of the person in front of me, and being willing to be open to assess what their needs are, and I make the change because I want to serve them well, which means you have to acknowledge there was difference.
Yeah, right.
Not just with you, but not just with the patient, but your difference. And then you have to come up with a solution. So that brings in culture right there, because culture is recognizing differences and giving value to differences and modifying the such circumstances and actions so that you have a good outcome.
Absolutely. And that makes so much sense why you call it cultural humility, because you see the change that you need to make, and you make that change. When I talked about personal statements in another video, I talked about how it was really important to not come off pompous at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's something that'll kill your application. And so I really appreciate what you were saying about how on your personal statement, this is you talking about the growth that you've made, and you showing that yes, that you are that you have developed humility over the course of building yourself.
I tell students, I think the best applications is the person who knows themselves, who really knows how they arrived at this point in their life. And they're aware of all of the major decision points that occurred that led them to stay on this path. Both the good ones and the bad ones.
Right.
But they can tell those stories, and they are able to articulate the story, but from the point of view where they are displaying their growth through that life experience, and how that experience solidified their commitment to wanting to go into medicine. I find my students who are non-traditionals, those usually students who have been out in the workforce for a while, and they come back, they're really clear, are able to put that out there, because to change careers, they've done a lot of thinking about why I'm doing this. And they've already lined up all the reasons, because they had to first convince themselves this is what they wanted to do and make a life change, and then convince everyone else in their life this is what they wanted to do. So they already have that story.
Right.
For my younger students who've just done high school, middle school, high school, college, some of them it's just like the train has just left the gate and their destination's medical school, but they're not paying attention to what's happening on the journey. And so all the experiences are flying by them, and then they get to the destination and they're like, so what was that like? And they haven't thought about it. And so it becomes harder for them, because the train was left the gate, and they just sat and rode it through.
Sure.
Whereas my students who are non-traditionals had to step off that train a couple of times, and they had to think about, why am I here?
Right.
Do I want to get back on this train? What is it going to take me to be back on this train? So I try to really tell, if you're a first-year student in college, just keep a journal about your personal and professional and emotional development that occurs as you are continuing to explore this career as a possibility for you. And just keep it writing, and just free write. It doesn't have to be formal sentences, but and yes, tell me some of your feelings, because it doesn't. So it's and the students who do that later have said, I'm so glad I did that, because when I got time to write this essay, I had so much. My diary on my life as a pre-med student was full, and I had lots of pearls that I could take from that and write my personal statement.
That is great advice.